Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Raw Faith. This is Raw Faith episode 13. Yeah, even after a week hiatus, I knew coming back we were on episode 13. That's right. Uh, yeah, but today we're going to be talking about just something simple, but I think a lot of new believers need to hear, and maybe even some existing believers. But we're going to be talking about just finding a church that fits you. I know for me, I'll speak a little bit to my experience before I toss it over to P Dog over here. But for me, I didn't grow up in the church, so becoming an adult, I really just went to the church that other people around me in my community were going to. But once I moved down to Florida from Indiana, it was kind of an opportunity to find a church that fit me. So took that opportunity and hooked Joe and Gabe up with one of the best churches I've ever attended down in Orlando. Of course, I no longer live down there. Come out to Colorado. Now I go to an amazing church in Peak City. But yeah, it was a fun experience. Obviously, it can be a intimidating experience finding a new church, going to a new place, going for the first time to church maybe. So we're just gonna dive into the church experience and finding a spot that fills your cup and works for you. P Dog.
What's happening? Yeah, it's an important topic. It can definitely be looked over, especially in the beginning, but certainly necessary, especially if you're just finding a home church that simply call home. Honestly, I'm still kind of in the searching process of a home church, so this will be unique for me to speak from, but similar. I mean, not similar to you. I did grow up in the church. Had a home church for many years, and then up until this past 2 years, I've began to kind of hop around to search for a new one. But from growing up to the church to the season that I'm in now, I've got some cool perspectives to speak on. So pumped to dive in.
Yeah, before we do that, why are you wearing a winter coat, bro?
Bro, I'm freezing, dog. I went on a walk like 10 minutes ago, and it was so cold outside.
He's in Alabama and he's freezing, huh?
Yeah, I'm gonna take it off here in a minute. Let's warm up.
You wouldn't survive out here in the snow.
No shot.
No, actually, we got 2 feet of snow like last weekend, this past weekend. It's all gone now. It's crazy to think about.
It melts so
Melted.
fast.
Yeah, it does. That sunshine, man. If that was the Midwest, that snow would have been here for 2 months. But not here to talk about the weather. So let's dive in. Curious, just right out of the gate, from your perspective, why you said you had a home church, you grew up in a church. I know you're still in the same area, so it's not like you've moved. So, like, why are you looking for a new church?
Yeah. Love my home church. That was my home church. It's called Woodmont Baptist. Great people, great pastor. Um, but I just wanted to see what else was out there, first of all. I wanted to keep an open mind. And then also just that church is more of an older generational church. And so with that, like the pastor tends to speak towards the older generation, some music catered towards that older generation. And so I just want something a little more, a little younger, I guess you could say. So a pastor and some music that has some spunk to them, that has some liveliness to them, if that makes sense. So it's kind of why I decided to hop around. And that, to that point, if you go to a church, you don't have to stay there. For anyone trying out churches right now, just because it's the closest one to home or that's where your family goes to, like, feel free to hop around and try churches for a little while.
Yeah. So I think one big point you're making there is just relatability and like in fellowship. Like we need relatability. Like if you're in a crowd of people who are 30, 40 years older than you, it's going to be really hard to grow. And, you can definitely get wisdom from these people who are older than you, but they can't necessarily relate to your struggles in the season that you're in. They can't relate to where you're at in your life. So, and they're not, the pastor may not be up there speaking. He may not be able to relate. And I think that's two things I love about the most recent churches I've been a part of is action the pastor's in his 30s. Same thing with Peak City, pastor in his 30s. Like young pastor who is speaking with that youthful fire, that energy, like talking to the young crowd, like, hey, we're called to go out here and take some action. Like we're called to go out here and move. Like
For sure.
so. Whereas I feel like that older crowd, it can be a little bit different, trying to teach the old dogs new tricks, trying to just get them out of their stuck ways.
Totally.
Really, I feel like that could be a lot of messaging. So I think one key point that you touched on already is relatability. But before we just completely shift off of you, curious, just like, do your parents still go to that church? And like, how was that conversation? Did you ever have to have that conversation? Were they just respectful of like you jumping around churches, or I don't know if that dynamic ever came about or not?
Yeah, my parents they love that church. That I think they'll die there. But yeah, I mean, we never had to have that conversation.
Right.
It was a mutual respect thing. Like, I mean, just because we go to separate churches doesn't make me any less of a Christian. We both understand that because we have mature relationships. And my dad even said a couple years ago, he was like, "Look, if you want to go hop around and find which church fits you best, feel free." I mean, soon after that, it's when I took initiative and just kind of started to explore on my own a little bit. But yeah,
That's huge, man. Kudos to your dad. Kudos to John for having that maturity to be able to do that. I feel like a lot of people in the church, they may see their son going to a different church, may hurt their image within the church. Like, I don't know. I could just see a lot of church politics coming up
yeah,
from some people. So kudos to your dad for being above all that and just understanding like my son needs a relationship with Jesus and he's got to go get that wherever he's got to go get that.
yeah,
So hopefully anyone listening to this, like if you grew up in a church and you're like, oh, I don't know if I could leave. My family's been at this church my whole life. Like people know us, they know my family, they know me. Like, man, don't hesitate to jump around. Like if the people aren't understanding, that's a sign of immaturity in their faith. It truly is. And I hate to say that sometimes, but it's the truth, man. Like if people are going to get caught up in the politics of it, you just tell them, hey, I got to go fill my cup and grow my relationship with Jesus. It's way too vital to
for
settle for a
sure.
church that's not doing me right. So, and it's no shot at the church. You just may not be the fit for it. Like they may be really good for other people, such as Paden's example. Maybe perfect for his parents. They're getting filled up. They're on fire for Jesus walking out of there. He's not so much. Like it's just a reality of the situation. So it's no shots at the church or at your parents or anything like that. It's just we need some different experiences, to grow closer to God, and that's just all there is to it. So that's
100%.
a very unique position. Curious, just third question I got for you is like, what are you looking for? I know you've kind of touched on the youthful energy, but when you're jumping around, like, how's your experience going into the church? Like, what boxes are you trying to check of a church? Or is it just like something where you just have this, like, man, this feels like home? Like, this one feels like it's it. I don't know.
I mean, definitely that one. Just the one that just feels right. Besides that, I've already mentioned youthful energy, and then also churches that have involvement outside of just Sunday and Wednesdays. They may
Mm,
have some groups going. I know for you, like it may not even be your church, but you play basketball on Saturdays with guys from a different church. So
yeah.
I mean, activities like that you can get involved in outside of Sunday and Wednesday.
Yeah. And that's huge too, because then you can really connect with people. When you're going in on Sunday or going in on Wednesday, like typically you're just hearing the sermon and worshiping and leaving. Like, you're not really sticking around for conversation. And if you are, it's usually 5, 10, 15 minutes max. Like, and then it's just quick catch up with somebody and you're leaving. So having the opportunity outside of the church services to connect in groups and small groups, whether that's Bible studies or like you had said, playing basketball with fellow believers, like or like worship nights or youth groups, like all these different stuff that you can get involved in, like that is huge in building community and fellowship and growing our faith. So that's a great point there.
Yeah.
A point for me that I'll add to that question, I think, is the arguably the biggest thing I look for, one of them for sure, is just good worship, man. Like,
Oh yeah.
I need good worship in my life. And for anyone listening to this, like, if you have not experienced good worship, or maybe you just haven't hit your worship era arc yet, like, I don't know, but I need good worship, man. If I don't have worship that just leaves me not necessarily like moved every time, I'm not going to say like I need to go in there and just feel completely moved, but I think it's known when I feel God's presence in worship. And at Peak City, I feel that, man. I can tell those people up there are there to just give it to God. And I can tell like the crowd is there to just freaking open their hearts, man. That's what it feels like. Everyone's just raw in there. And I think PD does a great job of leading that mission of being raw, being open, being
Mm,
vulnerable in our faith. So kudos to PD for leading that movement. But good worship is vital. I'm telling you guys, fill your cup, grow your relationship with Jesus through good worship. It'll change everything.
100%. I love that one, and I'm in total agreement with you. Another point that I was thinking of, as far as what I'm looking for, is when the pastor preaches. Like, I want to be challenged. I want to walk out of there,
Yeah.
not ticked off, but like just on the edge of my seat a little bit, feeling like I'm not doing something right.
Yeah.
So
Like
that's a big one for me.
convicted.
Yeah,
Convicted.
convicted.
Yeah. And for me, like they do so they don't do like a traditional altar call at Peak City. Um, like it's if you are feeling pulled to like start your relationship with Jesus, like just raise your hand. Everyone's got their eyes closed, heads bowed, and you just raise your hand if you're feeling called to start being a Christian. Of course, that's not me. Been a Christian now for a while, so a couple of years. So I don't raise my hand for that. But PD always does like a second calling to raise your hand. And again, this is not they like call you out and make you do something or like bring you up to the front or anything. It's literally just raising your hand, putting your hand down. That's it. It's
Yeah.
just you personally showing Jesus that, hey, that message spoke to me. I'm called. I'm ready to follow. Or he does a second one that I really love in the name of conviction. It's like whatever his message is around. So, for example, it could be like if you are not surrendering your finances to God, like, and you're feeling that
Mm,
in this season, like if you're feeling convicted to surrender to God in this season, like raise your hand. So it's like this second call to action for the people who are already existing in the church. It's like maybe you're not making the decision to follow Jesus, but maybe you haven't been doing XYZ action. Raise your hand in that. So I love that second like call, man, because I'm always getting convicted in those, dude. Like it's just I'm always raising my hand. I feel like with that conviction. So it's like right there is a call to action, which I love because I feel like when you're getting convicted with a message, you can oftentimes leave the church and just sweep that under the rug.
mm,
But I feel like when PD does that call, that second call, and I got to raise my hand in that moment while I'm still in the church, I feel like that is undeniable when I leave the church. I feel like the
mm.
conviction carries, if that makes sense, because I took an action to say, like, yeah, that spoke to me. I felt convicted. I need to do something about that. I took one action by just simply raising my hand, so then I feel convicted. Uh, Beyond that, to continue taking action outside of the church towards whatever it was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I liked it a lot.
So, and that's, obviously I went to Action Church down in Orlando in the Peak City. It's all about, action. PD's always convicting with messages. So, great point. Great point. I think that you should feel convicted and it should move you to take action. Like a church should move you to take action. Faith without works is dead. It's like, take freaking action, man. If you're not going in there getting convicted, take action. The
100%.
perspective I want to speak to uh, is the perspective of being new to church as well. Because I feel like there's probably someone listening to this that has maybe never been to church. Didn't grow up in the church, is feeling convicted right now of like, man, I know I need to be going on Sunday. Um, so it's a little bit different, I feel like, from your perspective of growing up in the church and then just like switching churches. because I feel like you've done the whole church thing for a while, so it's probably pretty comfortable no matter which church you step into. Like, you know what to expect. You know how vulnerable you're going to have to get on day one. Whereas people who haven't been in the church, myself, growing up, like, you don't know what to expect, right? It's like, what are they about to do? They're about to put me on stage. Like, for some reason, we just go to like worst possible outcomes. Like,
For sure.
the reality of going to church for the first time is you're going to slip in, you're going to sit in the back, you're going to get a few hey, highs, hellos, maybe a high five, a handshake or two, and you're going to walk out after the sermon is done. Like that, that's the reality of going to a church for the first time. So, but for some reason our mind just goes to worst possible, like just fear based. What are we going to have to do? What are they going to ask us? Like, no, everyone who's in that church understands and is trying to meet you where you are. Like, everyone has started their relationship with Jesus for the first time at some point. They understand that comes with a lot of question marks, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of unknown, and they're not going to add to that. And it can't be intimidating, to like go get connected or whatever. Like, I feel like every church now has like, I don't know, like a connection center or like some sort of like, if you're new here, come to this info bar and we're going to set you up with all the opportunities you can to plug in. Like, that seems intimidating as crap for a new believer. I'll just throw that out there. Because for me, I was like, no way, man. No way I'm going to get connected. You'll see me in the back row every Sunday. After that, see ya.
No, I mean, but those connection centers are great. I know they seem intimidating, but for anyone listening that's like plotting to go, definitely go to those centers. Because number one, like, they're not going to make you get on stage, like Matt was saying, share your testimony in front of hundreds of people. They're not going to make you put on any weird robes or anything. Like, it's just to get you connected, to learn a little bit more about you, and they'll probably give you some free gifts of some sort. So that's a plus. But yeah, just don't be intimidated by that.
Yeah, it's easier said than done for sure. But he's right. Like, they're just going to help you, break the ice. Consider it an onboarding, into any business. Like, that's what it is. It's the onboarding process. Just educate you about the opportunities at the church. They're not going to force you into one. Or, are you free on Wednesday nights, 8 p.m.? Well, you better put it on your calendar and then, judge you for not being there. Like, it's not going to be any of that. It's just going to be, here's some more info. Probably here's some gift, a Bible or shirt or something. Here's a card with more information. Like, if you have any questions, I'm here. Like, that's what that experience is going to be. So, and if it's not that, then maybe it's not the church for you. I don't know. Like, I don't want to put any churches in a box, but, if you do feel uncomfortable going to the connection center or whatever during the service, like he's saying, if it doesn't just feel like, okay, this church might be home, like, give it a few times too. I wouldn't say go in the first time and then just, this doesn't feel like home, leave.
Yeah.
Like, give it a few attempts, so. But yeah, maybe it's just not the one if it just doesn't feel settling, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. You certainly gotta give it a couple tries. And I think another big point as well that could help is just like going with friends or family if you've never been in general. Because, I mean, on top of just navigating and taking in all that the church has to offer, you still got to make the smaller decisions of, like what door to go in, where you're going to sit in the church, et cetera. It's just a lot to take in and a lot of decisions to make walking into it. So, I mean, if you go with friends or family, just to experience it for the first time, I think that would help.
Yeah. It's a prime opportunity to invite somebody. Like, I feel like we all have somebody who's open to it, like whether they're involved in church or not. Like, we all have that somebody next to us who's kind of on a similar path we are. At least I know I had that. Just people who are open to it, who'd be willing, just be down to go. So, and if you don't, that's a reflection of the people around you. So that could be a convicting thing in itself right there. But
for sure.
Yeah, I think that that's a big one. If you can't, it's just like doing anything else, Like I remember the first time I went to jujitsu class, was so glad to have Joey there,
Oh
like
yeah,
who'd been there, for a year or whatever, like knows the ropes left and right, can just show you the ropes and make sure you don't look like a dork, and you got your mouth guard and stuff like that. Like
for sure.
it's just so beneficial to have someone by your side, even if they don't know the ropes. They're just willing to be like, "Oh, we're gonna figure this thing out together."
Totally.
So yeah, I think that's a big one. Trying to think of any other points I might add to this about finding a church, man.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you if you had any, like when you were kind of hopping around, specifically in Orlando, like if you had any struggles or walls or resistances towards finding a church.
Yeah, one thing I did not like, first thing that hit me was the remote locations. Um,
Mm,
so what I mean by that is typically in these bigger cities, primarily, maybe even smaller cities. I don't know. Probably have to be a pretty big city, but what you'll have is you'll have these one main campus of a church, and then you'll have say four other campuses in the city. I'm going to talk to Orlando specifically. Action Church, it had one main campus, and then it had like four other campuses in Orlando. The four others literally just streamed the main service. So they had their own worship. They had their own like guy who came up and delivered information, but the main sermon was streamed from the church. And for me, I don't know if this is everyone, but for me, not my thing. I don't want my pastor on a screen. It is beyond 2020. We do everything over this freaking laptop. I am not going to church and trying to fill my cup through a screen as well. So again, maybe that's you. I don't know. Maybe you're okay with that. I know people who are. So, but for me, it was not my thing. That was one barrier that I had hit. Was that I think another thing too was Joey and Gabe. They were going to a church for. I know Gabe had been going for a long time. This one church, and Joey obviously was just like, okay, Gabe goes to that church. I'm going to go to that church. So
yeah.
I started going there. I probably went there 3 to 5 times. And I was like, I had to have that conversation with those guys. So that could have been another barrier. Luckily, our relationship is rock solid. I knew, how I was going to be responded to, which was immediate support. And like, heck yeah, Joe was even in to check out churches with me. I think Gabe would have been too, but I think he was traveling or something when we were doing it. Uh, so yeah, like having that conversation, like maybe that's someone right now who's in a group of friends or family. I know we talked to family, but in a group of friends right now who is going to a church, it's like you almost risk sacrificing fellowship if you want to go to a new church, like with the people you already have around you. And that's what I had told him. Actually, I was like, if you guys choose to stay at this church, I'll stay at this church. But I was like, I think there's better churches in this
Hmm.
city for me and for us. I was like, there's nothing against this church. It's solid. It's okay. It's good, but it's not like wow, I want to go there. And so they were like, oh no, dude, let's look around for sure. I mean, we're in Orlando, Florida. Like it's a lot. It's a big city. So
Yeah.
check out Action Church. I absolutely love it. Joe absolutely loves it. We get Gabe in. Gabe absolutely loves it. Over a year later, I live in Colorado, and they still, every time I call them, are talking about Action Church, man. So sometimes I say, like, God literally put me there for that season just to get them to jump churches over to
Yeah.
Action. And Joe's getting baptized this weekend.
Dude, what?
Yeah. So, yeah, he got
No
baptized
way.
as a, like, Catholic as a baby. And so this is kind of his time to make his decision following Jesus, not the child baby like baptism, which I never
Man,
got baptized. So you could probably speak to that. Did you get baptized as a baby?
not a baby. When I was like 6 or 7, but it wasn't like a full commitment. So I need to get rebaptized.
I was about to ask. Feeling called to do it again, huh?
100%. I need to. I dropped this in the goals chat and Elevate like several months back.
Mm,
So gonna do it.
what are you waiting on?
At home church.
The right spot, huh? Hey, take a trip out here. I'm sure Petey's got a body of water waiting on you.
A big old tub.
Yeah, dip you in like a chocolate covered strawberry, man.
Oh, man, I'll jump in that thing.
There we go. Cannonball backflips into the baptism tub.
Heck yeah.
Oh man. But yeah, so I mean, yeah, Joe's getting baptized there. Like, so that can be a barrier too of just having the conversation. But for me, it went incredible. And for you, hopefully, it goes incredible as well. If you're somebody listening, you're like, it's time for me to have that conversation. Hopefully, it goes well. It should. The people around you should be open. I think if you just sit down and maturely say, "Here's where I'm at. Here's what I want to try," um, they should, accept that. It's definitely tougher in a small town. I will say that. Like, I don't know the size of a town you're necessarily in, but for me, growing up, small town Indiana, not very many options, right? Like, not very many options. And one thing I I hated, I don't know if other people hate this, but I hated that I knew everyone in every church, man. Because it's such a small town. You go to a church, like, a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I did not like that because then it was just like I couldn't go in, and I loved moving to Orlando and not knowing anyone. It was like my favorite thing about it because I would go in and it was just me and God, man. And that was big for growing my faith, and I still carry that mentality today. Um, because when I used to go into church and I would know people, now you're having conversations. Now it's like you feel less comfortable raising your hands during worship, like just stuff like that. Like you're not as bold in there and able to just be comfortable in there. At least I wasn't. I won't speak for everyone, but I moved to Orlando. Don't know anyone in the church, man. I went in there and I was like, this is just me and God. I don't know any of
Yeah.
these fools. Like, this is awesome. So carry that mentality today. Even though I go to Peak City, obviously I'm going to church with Tawny and Mitch and Claire, and I know some other people in the church as well. Even obviously know PD, the pastor. So knowing people in the church, I still have that mentality, and that's something I shared on the worship episode. Like, it's me and God. If
Mm.
Jesus was standing up on that stage, how would I be worshiping? That's my only lens that I'm thinking about. No one else is in this room right now. Like, this is between me and Him. So that's been a big one for me. So with the small town thing, it's tough.
Yeah. That's a great point. Um, and when you come to join a new church and it's basically like a fresh start, similar to what Matt had, be intentional with that. Just like the energy that you bring into it, the intention that you bring. Because, like, for me, when I go back to my home church, it's almost like I'm just stuck in my ways there for
Mm,
how I was brought up. Like in the worship, I'm not as engaged. I'm just like just kind of getting through it, stuck in the ways of how I was when I was a teenager. I'm not as engaged when I listen to the sermon, just because those habits. We're creatures of habit. Anytime we go into an environment at a certain time on a certain day, like we're going to go back to those old ways. So when you go to a new church or even one for the first time, like just set the intention and just be intentional about what kind of energy you're going to bring into it and how you want to be in that church. It's a fresh start.
yeah, amen to that. Clean slate, we'll take that all day. And I think, like,
100%.
with where you're at, like with where Joe's at, getting baptized, like that fresh start is huge. Like when you come to be your own adult and develop your own relationship with Jesus, like it's big to have that fresh start, man. To set your own habits and your own intentions, like you're saying, at a place, at a house of God. So that's big. Trying to think of anything else we might throw in to enhance the church experience, help people find a new church. I think something that could be beneficial too is just like Googling churches. Because I know, like, there's a guy in Elevate, I won't name names, but there's a guy in Elevate, like, he was very hesitant to go to church. He's just asking me, he's like, hey, can you, like, look up my area? I don't know if he asked me to do it, but I just did it just to try to help bridge the gap.
Yeah.
Um, and so what I look for when I'm Googling churches, I look for something that shows kind of that youthful energy, like you're saying. I think it's very apparent to see, like especially younger, they're gonna have a social media presence,
Hmm.
stuff like that. Like that'll show you youthful, people and energy. is a social media presence and online presence. And then I think also I just look for non-denominational. I think that can get into the weeds of like someone who's completely new to this whole thing. Like there's all these different denominations of churches, like Baptist, like you were saying you used to go to. You got Catholic churches, Presbyterian, like all this stuff. I just look for a church that has that youthful sign of energy and non-denominational. I don't know if there's anything you could think of that may stand out when just like researching or googling churches.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Social media presence, easy to find. Website, easy to navigate.
Yeah, if they don't have that, they're probably an older church. It's just the reality. They're not up with the tech, up with the time.
For
Um,
sure.
and again, no shame to them. They're just serving a different crowd. We're just young guys who need relatability, like we talked about, need energy. We want to walk out of there convicted, on fire, ready to go, freaking carry our cross. Like that's
100%.
it. So yeah, I mean, I think we're at the 30-minute mark. I think it'd be a perfect time to wrap up. Hope somebody got a lot out of this. Obviously, we didn't dive into scripture. That'll be a fun episode, diving into scripture, talking about the early church
Oh,
in
yeah.
Acts. We could do that for sure. A lot of good stuff coming, but be sure to comment. What topics you want us to cover. That's what we're trying to dive into. And it's fun for us to research, learn, and engage with you guys. So appreciate that. But I hope somebody got some value out of this, man. Like big takeaways. Just find a spot that feels like, okay, I can flourish here. Like I could really see myself growing my relationship with Jesus here. Like it feels good. I'm getting my cup filled when I walk out. I'm feeling convicted with these messages to take action to change my life. Like worship is good. Like things of that nature. So any closing comments, sir?
I'm good, brother.
Man, one thing we got to say is God is absolutely working, dude.
Amen to that.
All
Can't deny
right.
it.
Much love. Peace.